Welcome to Crime and Sacrifice. I'm your host, Brianna, and this is episode 11, Norodin, Lucman. Many people know about the horrors inflicted by the Islamic State, the acts of cruelty and violence that stretched well beyond the areas controlled by ISIS in the Middle East. They inspired violence in Western nations, Africa, and beyond. During this time period, many other Islamic extremist groups around the world swore fealty to the Islamic State as the group gained power and notoriety. Among the groups that pledged allegiance to ISIS were two notorious extremist organizations operating in the Philippines: Abu Sayyaf, a group that had been around for decades and was known for taking hostages to fund their campaign of violence, and the Mott group, led by Muslim brothers Abdullah and Omar Khayyam Mott. The latter had ties to organized crime in the area before claiming to fight for the sake of their religion. When the leader of Abu Sayyaf, Isnilan Hapilan, pledged loyalty to ISIS in 2013, he was named by ISIS as Emir of all Islamic forces in the Philippines. And the Mott brothers joined up with him to begin some of the most bloody and brutal fighting outside of the Middle East during this time period. The Islamic militants following these two groups rose in ranks to almost 1,000 strong and chose the city of Marawi to make their stand, a small city with a population of around 200,000 people, located on one of the Philippines' southern islands. Unlike much of the country, which is Roman Catholic or Christian, Marawi is one of the few places in the Philippines that is overwhelmingly Muslim, close to 99% of the population at the time. However, there were, of course, Christians who lived in the area, others who weren't Muslim, but who visited the city for work. On May 23, 2017, this group of Islamic extremists, who were encouraged by the bloody attempts at revolution perpetrated by the Islamic State, tried to take over the city to start planning their own caliphate in the east. They were quickly able to seize entire buildings and parts of the city as they began fighting with government forces in the streets. One of the first things they did in areas where they had gained power was attempt to cleanse the city, which in their minds meant going door to door looking for Christians, executing them on the spot if they were unable to recite common verses from the Quran. The vast majority of Muslims in the city were horrified at what was going on, and as word spread that the militants were executing Christians, many Muslims in the city knew that they could not just stand by as people were murdered, many friends or co-workers. One local clan leader in particular felt that he needed to do something. Norodin Lucman was a Marawi local who was well respected in his city. A humble man with an easy and outgoing personality, Norodin knew several Christian families that were in immediate danger and, without hesitation, invited them to stay in his own home to hide, 64 people in total, men, women, and children. He told them to stay put and relax, that everything would be okay, thinking at the time that everything would be over in a couple of hours. However, as days passed and fighting continued to rage outside, Norodin's friends and family begged him to leave, to get away from the danger of the city, as fighters swarmed the streets and regular airstrikes leveled some buildings. But Norodin couldn't leave with the Christian families still stuck in his house, and also couldn't explain to his friends and family why he stayed, for fear that word would leak that he was harboring Christians in his home. Several times, Islamic militants, many of whom were just local kids that Norodin had watched grow up, would stop by his home. He tried to reason with them, telling them that this wasn't the right path, causing violence and death. However, they wouldn't listen to him, and Norodin made sure to keep each conversation to a minimum to dissuade the militants from trying to enter his home. He succeeded. Still, as the first week passed, Norodin realized that they would soon run out of resources. By the 12th day, they had no more food or water, and Norodin realized they had no choice now but to try to escape the city. Using their own clothing and what he had on hand at his house, Norodin went to work disguising the Christians as Muslim men and women, instructing the men to carry the children, and dressing the women with headscarves as used by local Muslim women. He told all 64 to follow him closely, to let him do the talking and to keep repeating Allahu Akbar as they went. God is great. Scared but willing to follow him, the group waited for a break in the fighting, and when it seemed relatively safe, they emerged and tried to make their way out of the city. The only way out of town was across a bridge that had unfortunately been captured and was now controlled by Islamic militants. Norodin felt a certain degree of fear as he approached, but to his relief, the kid guarding the bridge recognized him. It was just a local boy, and he greeted Norodin warmly and motioned for the guard on the other side of the bridge to let them all pass. Norodin felt a surge of relief as they crossed, not wanting to consider what might happen if they were stopped. Norodin was able to lead all 64 of the Christians he had harbored safely behind government lines. But Norodin is only one of many Muslims that banded together to save Christians during the conflict. There was also a group of Muslim police officers who believed it was their duty to save human lives, hiding 5 Christian construction workers who had found themselves stuck in the middle of the conflict and were terrified that they would be killed because of their religion. They remained in hiding until the officers received word that the military was soon going to begin bombing the city, and they knew they too had to try to leave. As they tried to make their way out of the city, they were stopped by an Islamic militant who demanded to know whether or not they were all Muslims. The militant asked one of the Christian workers specifically if he was a Muslim, and the worker froze, knowing that he would soon be asked about his knowledge of the Quran. That this would give them away could mean all of their lives. However, one of the quick-thinking Muslim police officers in the group, named Ricky Alwi, jumped in immediately, saying that the man couldn't answer the question, that he was unable to speak because he was in shock, but yes, that they were all Muslims. With that, the militant told them to follow him, but at their first opportunity to run, the group took off in a different direction and made it to safety. All 5 Christian construction workers and the police officers who hid them survived. In the end, the Battle of Marawi lasted for months. In October of 2017, the leaders of both extremist groups, the Maut brothers and Istilan Hapalan, were killed by military airstrikes. Government officials cleared out the last of the city's militant presence later that month. 990 militants were killed or captured, 168 government forces were killed, and 87 civilians died. The actions of Norodin Lucman and this group of Muslim police officers prevented that number from being even higher, putting their own lives at risk in the process. That's it for this week. I hope you found this case uplifting. Personally, as I've said before, I'm very grateful that people like this are out there, that instances of great tragedy and loss also include examples of people willing to show compassion for others when it matters most. If you want to see the show notes for this episode or get in touch, visit our website at crimeandsacrifice.com. And if you're able to leave a rating or a review, we really appreciate it. Thank you for listening. What kind of person will you choose to be?